Hey everybody, how you guys doing? I'm Eric Airlock, and this is a final and fourth talk on Nietzsche, I swear, because I can talk endlessly about Nietzsche as I explained, and I know that if I am giving four talks, it is starting to step on people's patience. So, given all of that, it is important stuff, which is why I'm trying to take it slowly and carefully, and I am flying right over the notes if you notice, and kind of summarizing and free going through it. So let's again close this out here for the final time, I swear. And we're just going, because as I skimmed through the notes and I was looking over what I haven't covered, I actually have covered a lot of it. I've just been covering it here and there and everywhere, all over the place. If you read carefully through my notes, I am describing a bit carefully the ideas I am somewhat dancing around with. And Nietzsche believes in dancing around with philosophy as performance. So that said, let's close this stuff out and cover some of the major ideas of the Superman and Thus Spoke Zarathustra to get through some of Nietzsche here. I can always give more talks, obviously, on Nietzsche's particular works. I often teach from Beyond Good and Evil. There's a lot to say about Nietzsche's other works. Genealogy of Morals is usually where Nietzsche discusses the priest type that kind of is not capable of certain things, so they inflict their will on others. And that's not just a religious thing. He would say priest type dogma, the closed-minded person who then inflicts authority on others is not just religion, but that becomes pre-Freud and very much the superego. So we're not talking about that and a bunch of other things. There's much more to say about Nietzsche's thought and how it influences. He has all sorts of brilliant ideas that pop out of nowhere. He was an amazing wordsmith, even in the German, which is the wrong language to speak, if you ask me, in the Anglophonic world. I mean, seriously, what are your business opportunities? So, with all of this stuff, Nietzsche is very fun to read. He had some very influential ideas. We've already been going over how Nietzsche is effectively against objectivity. He is decently against authority. He is a libertarian writing angry letters to every editor and their mother. But we are going to talk about here, Nietzsche is an immoralist who believes in the Superman. That Nietzsche said basically there was only one Christian and he died on the cross, he says, which a lot of post-60s Christians would think is groovy, back in the late 1800s was dangerous to say. He said it is the irony of world history that someone like Jesus turns into something like Christianity, which many people would think now that we live in more openly cynical Nietzschean times, like it or lump it. Why? I would say it's still human, though. I don't think it's going up or down necessarily this way. But Nietzsche says that people in history clearly, and he gets to think about how this is historically Germans ranting about the Catholic Church being Lutheran post-Hegel, right? They didn't have a political German revolution, but they had Lutheranism as a religious reformation and revolution, which is why he can talk a bunch of smack about earlier forms of Christianity with impunity. It's very easy for a Protestant to say the Catholic Church screwed up Jesus and then became a bunch of authority in the name of open-mindedness, and we're closed-minded in the name of open-minded. That's easy for us to say plenty today, and I live in the Protestant Anglophonic world. So the Germans and the English, they're Protestants. They have it real easy to see the example of the Catholic Church. One of the things I do all the time, compare Catholic Church to modern science, which one's smarter or why. And of course, if it's human, all too human, well, I'm glad this isn't the medieval Catholic Church, but this is effectively what Nietzsche would say. So Nietzsche says, teaching people to love their enemies, embracing outcasts, that's rock star badass. Jesus is amazing. Paul says women should all cover their heads and everybody be quiet in church. Who the heck is Paul? He's religion, man. Nietzsche wants people to effectively be something like the superior individual who... Nietzsche is very much about superiority of the individual. He is then sometimes misread as saying social superiority. Heidegger, not Heraclitus. Heraclitus is Nietzsche's favorite Greek, and mine. Heidegger is actually into making this social, and he was a card-carrying Nazi. So, yeah... But Nietzsche, who very much was not a nationalist or a racist or a Nazi, I mean, he was a man of his time, but he very much spoke out against those things for the individual. Says some are the Ubermensch, the Superman, who rise up above others. Actually, while the Nazis are starting to go off, two Jewish artists, I believe, came up with the concept of Superman, whose I do not know, and I still to this day have to say I've never read anything that shows that the idea of Superman comes out of the Nazis or out of Nietzsche at all. But oddly enough, Superman being, now the fact that he stands for truth, justice, and the American way is actually very herd-like and sheep-like for Nietzsche. That's very comic book character herd mentality. But Superman being an individual, not the Nazi stormtroopers as the Ubermensch, as the Superman, but Superman as the individual is very Nietzsche's Ubermensch. And Nietzsche was not the only person to use the word Uber or Unter. He did not say Untermensch so much, I think, but Ubermensch and Untermensch are actually the Nazi terms for like the superior racial human being and the inferior races. That is not Nietzsche. Please do not think Nietzsche gave them that concept. Super people, that's not Nietzsche's first time. I'm pretty sure Nietzsche's not using the phrase Ubermensch and Superman the first time ever. But when we say superior people, inferior people, of course, we can't help but. And there are Nazis who are into Nietzsche. Hitler did not know much philosophy, didn't care. There is a shot of him contemplating the bust of Nietzsche, which is a picture. And, of course, there is more to say about Nietzsche's sister. I will actually try to get to that here. Nietzsche's sister presented him to the Nazis on a silver platter and said he would have loved you guys. He would have hated them, but unfortunately Hitler took a photo op with that, and then plenty of Americans were convinced, and Jaspers and Kaufman worked their heinies off, Jaspers with a Jewish wife, Kaufman Jewish himself, to try to convince people that Nietzsche was actually an anti-Nazi, which he very much was. He is dangerously open, and he knows he is to anything. So his thinking is. So technically he says, this is going to be wonderful and terrible, plenty, like you know. So yeah. But that is very much the Superman. For Nietzsche, the Ubermensch is the individual who stands out from the herd, not the racial group that stands above humanity. But unfortunately, there are some Nazis who did take inspiration from Nietzsche, who did not thus come up with the concept of racial superiority from Nietzsche. Let me be very careful to say that. But they were inspired by Nietzsche's teachings about rise up above the herd and smash morality, because who the hell cares? It's not about the rules. Many people rightly and wrongly point out ties to the Nazis and say how the Nazis were a Nietzschean-ish group. Really, you could not be Nietzscheans and all be Nazis, I would say. But, it takes all kinds, and Nietzsche does not think, because Nietzschean thinking means nice time. No, it doesn't. That's exactly what he's saying. You may as well be a yes-saying person, because according to Nietzsche, this is just getting more, not better, right? So, let's see here. So, Thus Spoke Zarathustra is a fantastically complicated work, but basically Nietzsche, who's an awesome guy and saying great human individuals throughout history, like Muhammad, like Zarathustra, people Germans and Europeans are afraid of, Confucius, he says these people were amazing, so he has Zarathustra, who is possibly, according to Nietzsche and many, the world's first monotheist. I almost said monarchist. He wasn't that. I have cats scratching at cardboard boxes, trying to break on through to the other side. I'm going to have to, yeah, we're going to keep going though. So, buddy, pardon me one moment. Okay, and we're back after the floor show. So in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, though, Nietzsche writes a kind of allegorical strange tale full of all kinds of stuff that is very hard for people to read through. I have a student and friend who's tried to read through it recently, and I have books on interpreting it. I have somewhat left this work. This work is very famous in Nietzsche's name. Many people do not read much of it and understand much of it. However, the beginning is well understood by many people, plenty, although, as good interpreters say, towards the end he changes his mind plenty. Zarathustra is supposed to be the first guy to realize good and evil are dualistically opposite things. Zarathustra was possibly the first person to say there is a good God fighting an evil spirit or devil, And insofar as Abrahamic religions turned anything towards that increasingly, which they did very much over a process of 1,000, 2,000 years, Zarathustra is very much the guy who says dualistically there is good versus evil, and there is God versus evil. Nietzsche has this guy go up in a cave, hang out for a while, and the book opens where he realizes he was wrong. And that there isn't just good and evil split apart, that it's all one same thing. And he says several things to the sun and addresses the sun and other stuff. And then very quickly says God is dead and you and I have killed him in the marketplace with the tightrope walker I just mentioned. And it is very clear that what Nietzsche is saying is not so much a statement of outright atheism, there never was a God, or and in saying that is that he is saying, but it all is this amazing human interpretation beyond what Zarathustra tried to prescribe, as in, this is right, this is the religion, now we've firmly separated good from evil, because Nietzsche believes we're beyond good and evil in these times, plenty, increasingly, whether we want to be or not, with more humans, more stuff, more tempos. And so Zarathustra decides, I am a bee laden with honey, and I must go down and spread this wisdom to the masses. So he sees the tightrope walker. On the way, though, he passes a forest dweller. I have to mention, this seems like Nietzsche being aware, as folks were, of Indian thought in Germany increasingly. And Zarathustra asks this guy, and I feel this way, a lot of this is allegorical for any belief in objectivity or anything at all. Of course, Nietzsche says, those who reject God believe even more in objectivity. Or even double down, which is odd if you think about it. So Zarathustra encounters this very Indian forest dweller, very much like Buddha or Mahavir, the Jain. And given what Nietzsche says of Buddhism, this would make sense, actually, a lot, that this is something like an Indian, and he believes he is revering, in a certain sense, how amazing Indian thought was. And he's not, Zarathustra is not, this isn't all of Indian thought, but that Zarathustra finds this forest dweller. He says, why are you dwelling out here in the forest? Before Zarathustra goes into the town and sees the people gawking at the performance of the tightrope walker. So he says, why are you out here? He has been alone in a cave. He realizes, I need to go hang out with people. Why am I alone in a cave? Life is good and bad. I'm not going to be good in a cave by myself. But I'm glad that I hung out by myself for a while, Zarathustra says. He goes down, and as he's going out to the marketplace to talk to people, he encounters another person like himself who's in the forest dwelling by themselves. That's what he was just doing. And he says, why are you hanging out by yourself? And the guy says, well, because I love God and people are terrible, so I'm out here. This very much, I love objectivity. I don't like subjectivity. I don't like all of these people with the history and messiness of chemistry. I like pure math, pure chemistry. I'm hanging out here with the purity of it, or anything like that. And Nietzsche says, my God, this guy does not know that God and objectivity are dead and that we've killed it. I need to go out to the marketplace. And then he tells the people in the marketplace, they all laugh at him and they watch the tightrope walker, who's a poor imitation of what Zarathustra is doing as a symbol up in front of them. That is basically, in a very tight nutshell, that is actually the whole opening of Thus Spoke Zarathustra and how brilliant it is. And most people, including myself, don't read beyond that opening scene. Zarathustra's by himself. He realizes I shouldn't just be by myself. I shouldn't think God is simply good versus evil. It's all good and evil together. This is very Job and Kierkegaard, if you think this is anti-religious or anti-Christian. And Nietzsche is well on that this is not that it's Kierkegaard, but it's very Job. He comes down out of his cave and he sees somebody who's an imitation of him, almost. And this person is like, I can't hang with humanity because I want objectivity. And he's like, this loser, and he leaves him behind in the forest and says, this guy does not realize that's all over now very much. That is very much like in increasing modern times. People experience so much, so they say, I'm just going to stick with science or religion or art or what I like that's so steady as an institution that involves billions of people. That is what's good and solid. Think about people who say art, and continental thought is very much wanting to be art. Science, sure. Art is real meaning. The analytic side, Anglophonics, say science is really what is truly words I can say to another human being and feel satisfied. I've said the facts. But then, passion and art and stuff, that's sort of secondary and other things. Well, it's not one or the other. And again, is that all of this, these dualistic separations are not good enough for seeing the full range of it. And so Nietzsche feels, and Zarathustra as his character feels, I've got to share this vision this view from the mountaintop where you see good and evil all intermixed everywhere. Taoism says good and evil work together nearby each other all the time, sort of in the same office complex and cubicles. So he's like, I got to share with people that good and evil are all intertwined and life is amazing, and you should say yes to life and not just say yes to God or science, because that is not, and then say no to humanity. Here, please understand, I'm not saying say be religious or not, or say yes to gods or no to God, or yes or no. What I am saying here, and this is very serious, Nietzsche, if you love science or religion and you do not like humanity, you are doing it wrong. Let me say this very carefully again, because I do like addressing ideas of scientific objectivity beyond the human mind that we have with the Hawaiians, and something like scientists know better or something. Look, don't distrust vaccines, and try to realize that there aren't bad conspiracy theories out there that care about you, that are just trying to screw you up. But at the same time, if you think that any of these things would really be the safe thing that you can just believe in and now you're unlike others, because you've gotten it solid, that's the vision where Nietzsche's like, but if you look over history alone, again, don't listen to me, read more history, and you will see all of this out in front of you. And then what does Nietzsche say? Reading more history and experiencing more centuries onward and onward will lead humanity to polarize and be like, I'm either going to give up or I'm going to be hard lining in the forest. I'm here with my science or my religion. I don't like humanity. I often in debates with others, will make I make lots of crass, rude jokes and other weird things. I will often, if somebody tells me they believe in science or something, I often say, like with Zen Master Joshu, is there anything else you don't like? Okay, sure. But a lot of times with that, I will often joke, if somebody says they're really religious or really scientific, I will often say, wow, you don't like people then, do you? And watch the look on their face. Sometimes they're happy. They think that's hilarious. A lot of times not. A lot of times they just look confused or weirded out and they don't know what to say. I will say that one more time thus. If you believe in the objectivity of science and you do not trust people, think about that, okay? Think about the fact that you trust something like an institution or a whole set of things. What would that institution be full of? What has it been doing a lot of, huh? Here again, there are people right now on Facebook who are sharing the worst things science has done and saying, therefore, it's a conspiracy. No, that would be too easy, wouldn't it? That would be actually also hanging out in the forest, in another realm of the forest, saying, I don't like humanity at large. They're an evil lizard corporation or something. No. See, that's also hating people and hanging out in the forest. That's not richly embracing life. That's not richly embracing all the tumult and the crazy. I am very Nietzschean in this way. I don't say everybody has to be. I very much like this idea. If you like science and scientific objectivity and you don't think humanity is scientific enough, guess what, pal? We've been so scientific and it hasn't changed us much. So you clearly like the science more than the people plenty. And guess what the science is and the only thing it's for doing good and bad to humanity. That's all it's for. And again, I pick on science in particular because I believe in science and I have no problem not believing in it. But there's, again, disbelief and doubt in different ways. And here, embracing the richness of life, I think a lot of people, again, I've been mentioning through these talks, are getting depressed. They're seeing humanity not advance. Some of them are getting older in years. They know they will pass in the next 10 years or so. And they're seeing all of this politics and science be crazy. And they're like, I don't mean, I mean insofar as that humanity is not using our stuff for good or simply feeding people. And they're becoming depressed and they're just losing, they're losing faith in science and humanity. This is exactly what Nietzsche's for. If you find yourself not understanding humanity plenty and believing in science, you're doing something wrong. This is not embrace the conspiracy theories ever. You're doing something wrong if you find yourself secularly. I'm not a religious person. So I say to everyone equally, because we're all secular in being interdenominationally, whatever the heck we are or aren't religiously, which is what secularism means, religious or not as we please, is what it means and has historically meant. Not non-religious, but just as religious or not as you like, kind of freely, which means if you forcibly religious it's not that. As a secular person, don't believe that secular politics or secular science or secular art, as opposed to religious times, are making humanity good. No, whether we like it or not, we are being put through more of the same by life, and science is not turning it to the right or left, as the Taoists say, 1 square inch. Like, you can see it everywhere. You can see all of it. Believe as you want to believe. There's nothing, again, that could be better or worse than that. So Nietzsche says to the crowd, as Zarathustra, the speech he says here, which is the Superman, the Übermensch, I teach you the Superman, the better, the greater person. Confucius says the gentleman, the noble. Man is something that is to be surpassed. What have you done to surpass him? All beings have so far created something beyond themselves. First, Darwinian, major philosopher. All beings have so far created something beyond themselves, and you want to be the ebb of that great tide. Oh, now we have math and science. We have objectivity, and you would rather go back to the beast than surpass man. What is the ape to man? First Darwinian. Heraclitus plus Darwin. Once you were apes, and even yet man is more of an ape than any of the apes. I say that all the time. We are the apingest ape. How ape can we be? This is more ape than ever ape before. Yep. Even the wisest amongst you is only a disharmony and hybrid of plant and phantom. That's actually what Schopenhauer thought about crystals. Crystals are kind of half rock, half plant, and therefore they're a rock with a soul, kind of. I oddly think he's almost throwing in a moment of Schopenhauer for fun. Maybe to mock him. As he does mock Schopenhauer, though, loves him, lovingly mocking him. Truly, this is a image I bring up all the time. Truly, man is a polluted stream. And of course, I'm just going to say man here a bunch, and I often say humanity, actually, and make it gender neutral. Truly, humanity is a polluted stream. Now, notice some racists would think something here or others. That's not what he means. Because, he says, one must be a sea to receive a polluted stream without becoming impure. Now, that is very anti-Nazi, anti-racist language. A polluted stream, well, if you're an environmentalist or a Nazi, with a nature hike time, children, kindergarten, that, get the pollution out. Nietzsche says, and this is not the most environmental argument, so, and I am more environmental than this. Nietzsche also did not know about environmentalism. Think about if Nietzsche knew we were destroying the planet. Nietzsche doesn't even know that humanity's capable of destroying the planet. He thinks much more like a lot of people do still, but which I do also, plenty, is that, nature will just pop back after, perhaps, I don't know that we're going to peace out or not, but if we do, nature may pop back after 200,000 years, and that's nothing sort of for nature, kind of. Please listen to me nicely. But to be a sea, to receive a polluted stream without becoming impure, think about that. A racist would be like, never let anybody into your family. And this is like, no, become so wide you could let anybody into your family and it wouldn't corrupt you at all. Like, that's what he is saying there. And this is exactly why I yammer about scientific objectivity. Become the kind of person where you can study chemistry, immunology, anti-vaxxers, and then get something more out of it. And that could be anything. Here, I do not mean it's 50-50. No, I don't. But be the kind of person, if you're the kind of person who's worried about anti-vaxxers, soak up their arguments, figure it out, and now do good stuff with that. Like, don't reject the polluted stream. That's a lot of this where a lot of people, they're like, I believe in objectivity. I'm a scientific-minded person. I'm superior to other people because I wouldn't let nonsense into my head. Wrong. You already have a bunch of propaganda and nonsense in your head, whether or not you or I like it, because that's the way we all are. So if it's like, I believe in science since I'm 4, I'm not a prejudiced human being. Wrong. So much wrong. Just can't even begin to rant enough about how I'm objective. Yeah. I have very, very personal, powerful feelings about how people are taught we are objective because this place is far from objective. The Germans and French after World War II do not teach children that science is simply a force that adds objectivity and good to life. But the Anglophonics are still very much teaching children in classrooms science means better for everyone. Now, why would the wealthiest countries be more into saying that? Like, why? Because we have more power, because we have more, because we're doing more good and bad. Not because it's a lying conspiracy, because it is more. And this is the Darwinian struggle. So we and China get to be more science than Uruguay, and we're going to use it on Uruguay, us and the Chinese. And if you're like, but I don't want this stream to be so polluted, do you want to be a great thinker or a great scientist or a great shifter of paradigms in art, science, or politics? Do you want to be somebody who sees whether or not you can shift things? Well, then don't reject the polluted streams. Let everything in. Let the right one in, the wrong one in, everyone in, and now you have vampires. This is how we get vampires. Please don't get a bunch of diseases, obviously, and do a bunch of crazy drugs. Only do the legal drugs, yes? Clearly, with all of this, thinking is dangerous. Obviously, letting your door open to everyone is kind of crazy. But I do love the image, and this is a lot of why I rant against the objectivity of science versus Nietzsche. Nietzsche versus Beard and Marx. If you're more the hard Marxist or you're more hard lining into science pro-science is a weird word I don't want to use because I figure I'm pro-science too, plenty here. Yes, saying spirits, yes? One of the things that I did is not reject religion and try to learn a bunch from religion. That's a lot of what I did on purpose. I did that after learning Nietzsche from Hans Sluga and others at Berkeley. And the reason I did is because I definitely think people reject religion and a lot of human history as irrational, as stupid, and now, as you often hear, especially from white people, nothing before the 1700s is important. I've seen that in print. I've heard it a lot. Nothing before the 1700s. No, because now we're scientifically minded. That's a mind state a lot of people have. 1700 is when European peoples, white people, firmly had control. We can ignore the Islamic world and their history. Now we are the good guys. We can shift from religion to science. It will largely behave the same. Why? Because we behave like Muslims. Because we behave like humans. Because we behave like the Chinese. Because we are human beings. So, of course, what else? That is the kind of vision that I truly do think is a Nietzschean vision, where you're like, but of course we're like the Mongolians. Just learn from the Mongolians, you jerks. Here again, I do truly hope, as I hope you hear me, this does not discourage anyone from being a scientist, nor I hope encourage anyone to believe in mindless conspiracy theories about immunology or anything. This is, again, trying to get people to see a wider, wiser philosophical thinking about thinking, talking about talking, science about sciencing point of view. Do you know that science studies is a recent field? That people studying all of what science has done in the world, and this is because environmental studies has now shifted into science studies, which is more than just environmental studies, but people haven't been paying attention to what we're doing with science. So the whole time we've just been rubber stamping everything as like it's objective and rational, and then we don't know what effect that's having on anything. So I don't mean it's a conspiracy. Actually, vaccines are not what you think they are. It's just we haven't been keeping track of what vaccines have entirely been doing in the world at all. Which is how you get anti-vaxxers. This is how you get communists. This is how you get these things. If we don't know all of the good and bad that vaccines are doing in the world, how else would there be people who are well-educated who have no idea about things plenty, All I am actually saying to you at this point is Nietzsche is telling you how your world is, all of what you like and don't like in it very much. That is what I am ranting about, of course. Nietzsche says, man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Superman. A rope over an abyss, a dangerous crossing. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal. The truth is in the journey. It's the friends you made. The power was inside you. The friends were inside you all along. The friends we made along the way. Speaking of which, let's move along here. Beyond Good and Evil in 1886. Again, we're getting closer to our own time. It's considered to be one of Nietzsche's greatest books. He wants to push beyond categorical thoughts of good and bad and say that life is all of these things and be more Darwinian in that. He begins saying, why do we want simple truth? Or suppose we can simply get truth? Philosophy has barely started, but we seem convinced, and notice Hume says 80 years it's flourished. Nietzsche says, if we even ask, we seem like we're beings that are just so convinced. Think Descartes in every way, and watch my Descartes video again, but you can remember my rant if you saw it. Why are we human beings who are convinced that religion and science are just completely true, and we know that, and now we're going to move on, and we're going to do the devil's in the details? And he says, even asking this question about is truth true, there are Aztec and Mayan poems that have survived that say, are there true words? If not, these words are not true, in the work of Leon Portilla, which I have work on my site. Asking this question with Aztec poets, and they perhaps pissed off the priest more than once, is perhaps the greatest risk. Doing philosophy from a more subjective side and saying, is there truth and meaning at all, is the greatest risky thing that will upset the most amount of people. If we question our ability to gain truth, it becomes possible we will lose all hope for truth and turn to nihilism. That's the stoner or the nihilist or the other thing. It's like, well, I'm just not going to. Much love to everybody. If you just tune in and drop out, you don't do, and if you are going to the bar as a more conservative individual and just drinking your life away, the cop bar, what have you, that this is all turned to something like nihilism and life denying, which if there's so much life in our face, fire hose, my Nietzsche lectures, that we'd want to narrow it and close it off and deaden ourselves to it. But how dangerous and open to human creativity and thought are we as individuals? He says in these long quotes that most philosophers have baptized, notice the mocking of Catholicism again, and I use the phrase a lot, we baptize certain things as true and then claim we simply know them, but the most cautious of us, it hasn't even occurred to some of the most cautious of us that we could doubt here right at the threshold, that truth would just be true, and it'd be capital T truth and we'd know it. Now, it'd have to be capital T or something else in German, because all their nouns are capitalized. But Nietzsche goes on, and he says here, and I mentioned with Confucius, that judgments are false or that beliefs are wrong is not bad. What if all the religion and bad science was to get to more life? What if all the bad scientific theories that now are past, what if all the religions and forms of life that religion subsumes in Christianity, what if all that was good? And what if it all was wrong and stupid? What if we no longer believe in Thoth, but that was important? Like, why should we believe that it's only the hardest of absolute agreement now that we have that we don't disagree with, which would simply stand out as truth as opposed to a bunch of silly truth the whole dang time? What he says is, without accepting the fictions of logic, without measuring reality against the purely invented world of the unconditional and self-identical, I am quoting at length, without a constant falsification of the world by means of numbers. I have become very critical of quantities increasingly, and they may be very recent, numbers and specialized practices. Without constant falsification of the world by fictions of logic and numbers, man could not live. That means the species we are lies. It tells truth and it lies. We could not live without truth mixed with lies, is what he is saying, whether or not we're in his or now or a later era. And that's what you see, is what he is saying. And don't say to yourself, but we really create ladders in the Middle Ages now, so we really care about useful technology. Yeah, we all do. What are arrows? What are bows? Are those supposed to be just sort of flimsy things that don't really exist? To recognize untruth as a condition of life, that certainly means resisting accustomed value feelings in a dangerous way, and a philosophy that risks this would, by that token alone, place itself beyond good and evil. That is in the opening where he quotes the title of the work. So that is obviously, and again, Nietzsche is a beautiful writer. And again, whether or not you do or don't love or hate religion or science or politics or any of the large institutions and how they further specialize in life, they weren't so specialized before and people were surviving, shamans, etc. This is a good set of quotes right here, again, as far as what Nietzsche is saying. This is why teaching the opening of Beyond Good and Evil is probably one of the best ways of solidly teaching Nietzsche without getting lost in the weeds, as I've already done on many a talk. I also have to quote here, he said, what provokes one to look at all philosophers half suspiciously, half mockingly, is not that one discovers again and again how innocent they are, how often and easily they make their mistakes and go astray. Think Descartes and a lot of folks. In short, their childishness and childlikeness, but that they are not honest enough in their work, although they make a lot of virtuous noise when the problem of truthfulness is even touched remotely. They all pose as if they had discovered and reached their real opinions through the self-development of a cold, pure, divinely unconcerned dialectic. As notice, dialectic, he is mocking Hegelians and Kantians. One could say unconcerned logic. And here it would mean largely the same thing. He says, as opposed to the mystics of every rank, who are the more honest and doltish and talk of inspiration. So here he even insults the mystics and says they're more honest. While at bottom, it is an assumption. Here's Hume. A hunch, indeed a kind of inspiration. Most often a desire of the heart that has been filtered and made abstract. Think about the abstractions of science and the realities, and the abstractions of religion and the realities, and politics and art. That these philosophers, a desire that has been filtered and made abstract, that philosophers defend with reasons they have sought after the fact. Rationalism as opposed to a bit more cynical empiricism. They are all advocates who resent that name. They don't want to be advocates. They don't want to be biased, people who want to be objective. But they're arguing for this or that objectivity with passion. And for the most part, they are spokesmen for prejudices they baptize as truths, very far from the courage and conscience that admits to itself that that is far from the courage it needs to mock itself. I like that with humor and mistakes, also with Nietzsche and Confucius. Mock yourself, and you don't have to. I think of the far side with scientists doing equations and then running out for ice cream. I often think of being like, yay, like little children. It's totally fine to do science and have equations. Mock yourself and understand you're a little child, and everything is decently fine. You know? This isn't start or stop doing anything, including religion, art, science, etc. He says, the old Kant lures us on dialectical bypaths. He calls Kant out by name here, that lead us to his categorical imperative, the categorical certainties of Kant. Again, Nietzsche says Kant is the fox that was so smart enough to wander out of the cage only to wander right back into it and believe there are categorical objective certainties in the mind, but not in the world. We find it amusing to watch Kant tricked by his own mind and morals, is what Nietzsche says. Gradually, Nietzsche says, it has become clear to me what every great philosophy has been so far, the personal confession of its author, and a kind of involuntary and unconscious memoir. He says we do not have a drive to pure truth. They're a bunch of tangles of our drives, is why we do this or that, and then we kind of lie to ourselves. Now, that idea is very influential, and I embrace that, and many do, that philosophy is personal work. Not just that you're working on yourself, and now I'm trying to be my own therapist or something, all life long. You sort of are, and that's awesome. But that when you read a philosopher, you should understand this person, and I openly embrace this in teaching philosophy, you may notice in the talks, is telling you their life. They're telling you their beliefs and doubts. They're sharing with you their deep positioning on issues. And that is good and bad, and we can learn from it, and we can keep going, and all that's amazing to drink up, and there you go. But all the time, he says, here's another good quote, it is perhaps just dawning on 5 or 6 minds that physics too is only an interpretation of the world to suit us, if I may say so, and not a world explanation. He says, Descartes said, I think. Schopenhauer said, I will. Everybody thinks they have the pure thing in itself. And he says, I shall repeat 100 times, we really ought to free ourselves from the seduction of words. Baudrillard is very into seduction as a Frenchman. We are seduced by the grandeur of religion and science into being cowed into saying certain things and not others, and not being the great movers and shakers we admire. That is what he is saying. Another great thing here is he says, with regard to the superstitions of logicians, I shall never tire of emphasizing a small, tense fact that thought comes when it wishes and not when I wish. So it is a falsification of the facts of the case to say that the subject I is the condition of the predicate it. It thinks. That is something I use with Wittgenstein a lot. Reason being is because thinking is something that we weave with other things and ourselves all together. And so we don't just, and there are many Wittgensteinian things to say here about how we don't compose our thinking according to rules, and that's not how thinking works. I use this thought all the time and quote it in terms of Wittgenstein. I will leave that to itself. I also have videos actually already saying and stating some of these quotes. But Nietzsche marvels, and I put a picture of sometimes like a supermarket or Safeway. He says, what a strange false reality we've constructed. He says, long before supermarkets, we give ourselves a passport to everything superficial. And again, with the modern consumerist society, you have a lot of French people who are going to say a bunch of better words about this, but essentially look at modern society and industrialization and how we love lying to ourselves all the more, Nietzsche says. Science and religion and art and politics aren't bringing about a non-lying species. They're not bringing out the next level of guns is not bringing about world peace. Like, we're not bringing about, the next level of lawyers isn't bringing about honest law. This is, again, right now, especially with politics. I can bash politics even as, I bash science because people sort of put it on a pedestal as academia outside and then mock the humanities somewhat and say science is pure and good. In certain ways, I can believe I'm strong and safe. I am mocking all that and specifically calling all that out on purpose with Nietzsche. But of course, it's possible to do that in any way, with the humanities, with the sciences, with the safe way. He says, here and there we understand it and laugh at the way in which precisely science at its best seeks most to keep us in this simplified, thoroughly artificial, suitably constructed and suitably falsified world, meaning is dying according to Baudrillard in the modern world, and he knows what the internet is. At the way in which willy-nilly it, all of mind and life, loves error because being alive it loves life. Take care, philosophers and friends, of knowledge, and beware of martyrdom, of suffering for truth's sake, even of defending yourself, as though the truth were such an innocent creature and incompetent enough as to require your protection, as to need protectors. He says, in all seriousness, the innocence of our thinkers is somehow touching and evokes reverence, when today they still step before the mind and demand it give them honest answers. He says, request it, please, but I like demand, and I paraphrase and mangle the quote. It's like, okay, you don't like me and I don't like you, but now we're white people and now we're going to be scientific, or now we're going to be objective and rational and academics. Okay. So now, unlike the Hawaiians and unlike the other people and the French or the Muslims, I'm going to do truth now. Now, how stupid is that? I mean, how unwise is that? We're not, no, you don't understand. People had numbers and they had technology. But now we're really going to do objective. It's like, it's again, we do believe it. Isn't that beautiful? Use it, is what Nietzsche says. Isn't it amazing? That's most people. Yes, it is. And it's going to be for the rest of your life. So use that. A philosopher, he says, has nothing less than the right to a bad character. He is encouraging people to make mistakes, be wrong, and screw up royal in order to teach others. That is good. That's why I try to make such terrible jokes. I insist. So, and again, I will comb my hair at some point. Why couldn't the world that concerns us be a fiction? Shouldn't philosophers be permitted to rise above faith in grammar? There's a lot of Wittgenstein. There's so much here to actually mention with later thinkers and German Heidegger and French thinkers. I am specifically not, in order to get through this talk, and I am here at the end. In only 4 hours, yeah. So imagine when I do try to do this in 1 hour for people, and I do dodge and test. So he says here, one should not dodge one's tests, though they be the most dangerous. Fail, and then do more. Make mistakes and do more. I meet so many people, actually, who religion and science are very much, and politics are, but people, not so much politics, yeah? Religion and science very much convince people that you shouldn't screw up. This is very Nietzsche. To boil this down, if you are doing, and I already mentioned this in one of the talks, if you're doing religion and science so that you don't screw up, so that you're being moral or logical and you don't make certain kind of errors, you're fooling yourself. You make those kind of errors. Don't do morality or logic to make yourself safe perfectly. You're just being an example for some other schmuck, like is what it is. Here are 2 quotes, again, I do love from Beyond Good and Evil. Man's maturity consists in having found again the seriousness one had as a child at play. I tack squids to my ceiling. And finally here, one of the better anti-racist quotes, right before I finish off here with Nietzsche and the Nazis, which gotta mention. A people, a race, is a detour of nature to get to 6 or 7 great men. Yes, and then to get around them. It fits so well with the tallest thing on earth is the self, but the widest thing is the mind, which is Bodhidharma, who supposedly brought Zen from India to China. And it's so wonderfully, in fact, it's a lot of Nietzsche has to do with humbling ourselves and laughing at ourselves. A whole race, the white race, let's say, according to the racist, is to get to 6 or 7 great people and then just have humanity and the rest of white people pass them by, and now they're no longer important as the old paradigm. What a wonderful, again, way of humbling everybody. And this is why it is a shame that Nietzsche was, as mentioned, especially because of Nietzsche's sister, and Nietzsche warned Nietzsche's sister, who went with a fascist to South America, proto-fascist guy, to try to found a commune, and then came back when that all failed and the guy offed himself, which is a little bit foretelling, sadly. Nietzsche's sister definitely served, and there's a shot of his sister welcoming Hitler into the Nietzsche Museum, is that she definitely welcomed the Nazis to be into Nietzsche. But Nietzsche very much attacks what the Nazis are, and he would actually very similarly attack being, just to be fair, if you are just giving your life over, say, to being pro-environmental. I don't mean stop being environmental. I mean that is your whole identity, and you're like, this is simply the truth. Anybody against it is wrong, wrong, wrong. You become a zealot. Any zealotry, I'm just calling out this, randomly on the left or whatever. Any zealotry for Nietzsche is useful to life. It's going to get something out of you, but yeah. Because of that, Nietzsche over and over again attacks nationalism and racism effectively. I think it's Bataille who says he's an anti-racist. Nietzsche does say anti-Semite about himself. Hanging out with a woman and a Jewish guy as his friends and then other individuals. He did not want people to become racist. He did not want people eventually, I would say, to be sexist. At his time, I would say he became an anti-sexist eventually. But that said, yeah, he could be used by anything, and we know that. And again, in 1935, just after the Nazis seized Germany and control and are seizing power in 35-36, some Nazis are using their interpretations of Nietzsche to justify the movement. Jaspers published his exhaustive book in Germany on Nietzsche's philosophy while married to a Jewish woman, arguing Nietzsche was neither nationalist nor a racist, and he was dismissed from his professorship by the Nazi government for that, and also for being married to a Jewish woman and everything. Is like he was kicked out and left. They got the heck out of Germany before even worse happened in the 30s, of course. As did Kaufmann, the other major, who was Jewish, other major supporter and interpreter of Nietzsche's work, got the heck out. Both of them were saying, no, Nietzsche would say, no, these are the pieces of everything I and you are, and I'm talking about, no, like, this is not what Nietzsche wanted. It's what he knew was coming, though. Because it's not what Nietzsche wants. Life is not what he wants. It's what all of us do and don't want, and how well can we embrace that? In this, Jaspers said and wrote, and I do recommend his Nietzsche, as well as Kaufmann and Jaspers' books titled Nietzsche and then subtitled, are both, if you want to get into Nietzsche, reading both of those works is classic Nietzsche scholarship. Now people are critical of both Jaspers and Kaufmann, obviously have many other understandings. But I own both those books, have read them, taken thorough notes. A lot of this material comes somewhat from their interpretations and others and all of that, and I made sure and got schooled on all that to write this. But Jasper says Nietzsche is like humanity itself, and that anyone who wants to learn and think with the freedom of Nietzsche must suffer through the contradictions and lack of a system to earn this for themselves. May as well say here, Nietzsche did get sick and went insane and said he's having all the anti-Semites shot and thought he was kind of Emperor Napoleon with his father's insanity at the end of his life. Well, in the middle of his life, and was cut short tragically. But Bataille, the crazed surrealist of Paris Nietzschean, says, mentioned with Kojève and Ted Cruz and Hegel at the end of the Hegel, says Nietzsche was a star, so he had to explode. That said, much happiness, much love, more. So hopefully you're happy. I have often said, hopefully you're good and you're bad or else you're dead, although I'm trying not to start all the talks with such a message as opposed to hi everybody. But that is Nietzsche, the great mustachioed one. Nietzsche versus objective truth, mustache versus beard. Hopefully you use that for good, not evil, but evil, good, and all of it individually, and do more in life and love living. And I will see you and life if I ever see you.